They call her selfish. They whisper that she's difficult or too picky. Family members ask when she'll settle down, as if her life is somehow incomplete. But what they don't see is the quiet revolution happening behind closed doors. She's not waiting to be saved. She's not desperately searching for someone to complete her. She's discovered something that terrifies society, a woman who doesn't need anyone else to feel whole. Friedrich Nietzsche once said that the individual must create their own values, their own meaning. And that's exactly what she's done. While the world pressures her to conform, to couple up, to follow the script everyone else is reading, she's writing her own story. The uncomfortable truth. Most people can't handle a woman who's genuinely happy alone, because her existence challenges everything we've been taught about female worth. She's living proof that happiness doesn't require a +1. But here's what's really happening in the life of a woman who chooses solitude. She's not rejecting love. She's rejecting the counterfeit version that asks her to shrink, to compromise her essence, to become half of herself so someone else can feel comfortable. Nietzsche understood that most people live as slaves to others' expectations, but she broke free. And that freedom is both beautiful and terrifying to witness. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stop apologizing for your choices, to stop explaining why you're enough exactly as you are? Stay until the end. The reality might surprise you. There is a silence that speaks louder than any scream, a silence that only solitude can offer. When a woman chooses to live alone, she enters a realm where masks melt and mirrors multiply. She no longer performs, she observes. Her own presence becomes a question she must finally answer. What remains of her when she is not trying to please anyone? What echoes in the room when no one is calling her name? Nietzsche did not see solitude as isolation, but as initiation, a fire that strips away the non-essential. A furnace where the soul is tempered. She starts to see herself in fragments she had forgotten, the way she sighs, the curve of her breath. The rhythm of her solitude becomes a new dance. Without the constant noise of another presence, her inner voice grows louder. She begins to hear the buried truths, the dreams she denied to be loved, the fears she covered to be desired. In this space, nothing is hidden. There is no audience, only a stage where the self performs for the self. And in this rawness, there is something sacred. Most people flee from solitude because it shows them what they truly are. But the woman who stays begins to see. She sees how often she played roles to avoid her own emptiness, how often she loved so she wouldn't have to look at her wounds. Nietzsche believed that truth is not found in comfort, but in confrontation. In solitude, she confronts her shadows. She meets the parts of herself she once abandoned for affection. She listens without judgment. And she remembers who she was before the world told her who to be. In solitude, she is no longer a reflection of someone else's gaze. She becomes the original, the source. She is not a reaction. She is a creation. The solitude she feared becomes her liberation. She no longer hides from the silence. She inhabits it. She shapes it. Nietzsche wrote that one must still have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. And now, alone, untouched by the noise of others, she begins to glow, not for anyone, but because she is finally seeing herself. And in that gaze, she finds something unshakable. Herself. She no longer dresses hoping to be seen. She dresses to reflect the soul she is finally meeting. Her voice no longer bends to sound softer, sweeter, smaller. She speaks like someone who has nothing to lose because she has already found herself. The woman who lives alone stops playing the invisible game of worthiness. She does not linger at the edge of the crowd hoping to be noticed. She walks through life like a flame that needs no witness. Nietzsche taught that the free spirit must walk alone through fire. She has walked it. She carries its heat in her chest. She used to crave the glance, the message, the invitation. She thought love meant being picked, desired, claimed. But now, she sees how much of herself she edited just to fit in someone else's hunger. She remembers the times she stayed silent so someone would stay. The nights she wore a smile she didn't feel. The way she trained herself to be convenient, agreeable, digestible. Nietzsche called this herd morality, a life lived in obedience to the invisible rules of approval. But she no longer plays that game. She writes her own rules now, no longer. Asking to be chosen means reclaiming her energy, her time, her skin. It means realizing that not being wanted by someone is not a wound. It is information, a redirection. She stops asking what is wrong with her and starts asking what she was missing in them. She recognizes that the desire to be picked is the residue of a time when she abandoned herself to be loved. But now she picks herself. Every morning, every moment, she no longer seeks a pedestal. She builds a path, one step at a time, in silence, in truth. In Nietzsche's world, the highest human is the one who transcends the need for external validation, the one who creates value from within. This woman becomes that. She no longer waits to be validated. She validates her own becoming. Her solitude is not empty. It is rich with presence. She is no longer the girl looking up at someone to be seen. She is the woman looking in the mirror and not flinching. She sees herself clearly, without filters, without apologies. And in this gaze, she finds peace. Not because someone chose her, but because she finally stopped begging for it. She once believed in a story where love saves, completes, defines, where a man would arrive like a god to fill the aching hollow of her heart. She waited, she dreamed, she broke. But one. A day, the fairy tale shattered, and she did not grieve the loss of a man, she grieved the illusion. Nietzsche declared that God is dead not as blasphemy but as awakening, and in her heart the myth of the perfect man died the same way, not with hate, but with clarity, with the painful beauty of seeing what was never truly there. What dies in her is not love. It is fantasy, the kind that makes women wait instead of live. The kind that teaches sacrifice disguised as romance. She stops expecting someone to read her mind, to guess her wounds, to never hurt her. She stops seeing love as a cure and starts seeing it as a mirror. Men no longer appear as saviors, they appear as reflections, each one showing her a different face of her own longing, her own fear, her own forgotten self. She does not run from this. She studies it. She learns. In Nietzsche's view, truth comes through destruction. Destruction of false idols. Destruction of borrowed truths. This woman watches the ideal die, and from the ashes she rises. No longer a girl waiting for a prince, but a woman building a kingdom within. She recognizes the fairy tale for what it was. A tool of control. A cage made of flowers. A poem that made her forget her own pen, but she remembers now. She writes her own verses not for a man, but for the woman she is becoming. The end of the ideal is the beginning of freedom. No more waiting for love to make her whole. She is already complete. No more suffering in silence, hoping to be chosen. She chooses herself. Nietzsche said that one must become who one is, and she does. With every myth she burns. With every lie she buries. She becomes not someone's dream, not someone's prize, but a living truth, a fierce tenderness, a quiet revolution. And in this becoming, she discovers something deeper than romance. She discovers herself. She once believed that needing someone was love, that missing someone was proof of affection. That pain was the price of connection. But now, in the quiet of her solitude, she sees the truth behind that story. She sees how easily dependency dresses itself as devotion, how the desire to be held, can slowly become a chain. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, not as domination, but as mastery of the self. And now she begins to master the hunger that once made her kneel. She begins to understand the violence of needing what wounds her. She remembers the times she stayed just to avoid the ache of being alone, the times she accepted less because the silence felt unbearable. She thought loyalty meant endurance, that staying was strength. But she was wrong. Enduring pain is not strength if it comes from fear. Staying is not power if it comes from emptiness. Nietzsche warned against confusing comfort with truth. The woman who lives alone stops choosing comfort. She chooses clarity. And sometimes, clarity is cold, but it is also clean. It cuts the cords that choke. Dependency is subtle. It hides in the way she waits for a text, in the way her mood shifts with his tone, in the way she silences herself to keep the peace. She begins to track these patterns like a hunter. She catches herself in the act of shrinking. She notices when her worth is hanging on someone else's attention. And she stops. She interrupts the cycle. Not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Nietzsche said that freedom is the rarest and most dangerous of conditions. And she dares to taste it. Now she sits with her own silence and does not flinch. She meets her own gaze and does not look away. She is no longer addicted to the presence of another to feel alive. She becomes her own source, her own home. She understands that love can be beautiful, but needing love to breathe is a form of quiet self-abandonment, and she will not abandon herself again. She is not a wall waiting to be leaned on. She is the ground, the mountain, the wind, and in her independence there is no arrogance, only peace, only power. There was a time when her reflection was a battlefield, every flaw magnified, every curve judged, every line a reminder of not being enough. Her beauty was something to be earned, to be proven, to be traded. But now, alone, she begins to see differently. She no longer waits for someone to desire her. She becomes the flame that desires herself. Nietzsche praised the aesthetic life, the life of creation and expression, and she starts to create herself anew, not for admiration, for reverence, her own. She puts on lipstick like war paint, not for a kiss, but as a ritual, a reclaiming. The way she walks is no longer choreography for male approval. It is a dance for her own soul. She wears her clothes not to impress, but to express. She looks in the mirror not to assess, but to witness. Her beauty is no longer currency. It is art. Nietzsche taught that one must become a work of art. And now she is both the sculptor and the sculpture. No longer a muse waiting to be seen, she sees herself. To seduce herself means to fall in love with her own presence, to light candles for herself, to touch her own skin like it matters, to speak to herself in a voice softer than any lover has. Used. She no longer needs to be validated. She validates her own aliveness, the look in her eyes, the tone in her voice, the way she occupies space. All of it becomes a celebration. She becomes her own favorite view. Not because she is perfect, but because she is finally hers, completely. Nietzsche's vision of life was one of self-overcoming. She is no longer fighting her reflection. She is dancing with it, loving it, honoring it. There is no one watching, no one applauding. And yet she glows. She seduces herself with her own becoming. And this seduction is not about desire. It is about recognition. It is about seeing her own power and not apologizing for it. She is not performing. She is being. And in that being there is something magnetic, something holy, something free. She was raised on whispers that became laws inside her mind. Be nice. Be quiet. Be desirable but not too much. Be strong but never intimidating. She was taught to belong, not to be. These voices, inherited and invisible, shaped her spine into submission. But one day, she woke up. not with rage, but with realization. Nietzsche's Übermensch is the one who creates her own values, and she begins the war not against men, but against the man she internalized, the judge inside her head, the shadow. In her mirror, she starts to notice the rules she never questioned. How she apologizes for taking up space, how she shrinks her words to sound polite, how she measures her worth by someone else's comfort, and she rebels, not with noise, with presence. She no longer performs, she exists, fully. The war is not loud. It is slow, it is subtle, it is sacred. Each time she says no, each time she rests without guilt, each time she chooses herself. She is not asking for permission, she is reclaiming what was always hers. This war is not against others. It is within. She faces the parts of her that still flinch, that still crave approval, that still fear being alone. She speaks to them gently, but firmly. She says we do not need to earn our right to exist. We are not here to be consumed. We are not furniture in someone else's life. Nietzsche believed that to become free, one must destroy the old idols. She destroys the idol of the good girl, the obedient woman, the pleasing presence, and from the rubble she rises, undefined, unapologetic. Her solitude becomes her battleground and her sanctuary. She sharpens her truth. She softens her shame. She's no longer trying to be loved by becoming less. She's loving herself by becoming more honest, more wild, more whole. She's not anti-man. She's anti-erasure. She's not asking for a place at the table. She is building her own and inviting only those who bring truth. Nietzsche's Übermensch laughs in the face of fear and walks alone if necessary. So does she. And in this walk, she is not lost. She is found. There are nights when the silence is not peaceful but sharp, when the stillness does not soothe, it stings. The woman who lives alone knows this space, the hour when the world sleeps and her thoughts wake. She feels the ache of absence, the ghost of a body that no longer shares. Her bed, the echo of laughter that once filled the room. But Nietzsche never promised that freedom would be easy. He promised it would be real, and in this reality she does not numb the ache. She meets it, eye to eye. She does not run from the loneliness. She lets it enter. She listens to what it has to say. Not all pain is punishment. Some is purification. The loneliness shows her what still hurts, what still hopes. It brings the pieces she forgot to grieve, the dreams that quietly died, the love she never fully let go. She cries, but she does not collapse. She weeps, but she does not beg. She understands now that feeling does not mean failure. It means aliveness, it means depth, and she chooses depth. Nietzsche wrote that one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. Her loneliness is that chaos. It is not her enemy, it is her teacher. In its cold hands, she finds her edges, her limits, her fears. She begins to see that the longing is not just for another body, but for connection with herself, with the divine, with something beyond. She does not distract herself. She descends into the quiet, into the ache, into the truth. And from that descent, something begins to rise, slowly, powerfully. She is not broken, she is becoming. The nights are not curses, they are initiations. She stops asking when it will end. She asks instead what it is showing her. And in that question, she finds strength. A strength not built on denial, but on presence. Not on armor, but on openness. She realizes that solitude does not always feel good, but it is always honest, and she would rather live in honest ache than in sweet illusion. She is alone, and she is alive, and that to her now is enough. She no longer defines herself by what she lacks. She is not a question waiting to be answered by a man. She is an answer that no longer seeks permission to speak. The woman who lives alone becomes more than independent. She becomes sovereign. She does not fight to be equal. She realizes she is already whole. Nietzsche's creator gives birth not to a child but to a future. She is that birth, that emergence, that sacred defiance of being reduced. She is not waiting to be seen. She is vision itself. Her love is not a transaction, it is a radiance. She gives not to be kept, but because she overflows. She is not afraid of her own power anymore. She carries it like breath, natural, constant, undeniable. She does not whisper her truth. She speaks it. She does not soften her edges to be palatable. She sharpens them to be true. Nietzsche believed in becoming who one is, and she is becoming without apology. Without delay, without dilution. She is not for everyone, she is for herself. This woman is not bitter, she is awake. She does not reject men. She simply no longer needs one to feel alive. She chooses from abundance, not from lack. From desire, not from desperation. Love, when it comes, is a dance, not a rescue, a meeting, not a merger. She stands as her own pillar, and in this posture she does not push others away. She invites only those who can stand beside her, as equals, as mirrors, as witnesses, but never as saviors. She has saved herself already. Nietzsche's highest ideal was the one who says yes to life, all of it. The pain, the ecstasy, the solitude, the becoming. She says yes, fully, fiercely. She's not a woman who lives alone. She's a woman who has returned home, to herself, to her truth, to the sacred power of not needing to be anything but real. She's a force, not loud, not violent, but undeniable. And in her quiet there is thunder. In her stillness a storm, and in her eyes the reflection of a world being rewritten, one woman at a time. If this video spoke to a part of you that the world taught you to ignore, subscribe now. Here, every word is a mirror, every idea a doorway to deeper truth. Each week we dive into philosophy, psychology, and the raw realities of modern relationships. This channel isn't for those who want easy answers. It's for those brave enough to face themselves. Hit subscribe and begin the transformation within.